years now, eco-activists like Just Stop Oil have been climbing bridges, stealing limelight, dawdling to piss off traffic, threatening that Magna Carta, and gluing themselves to the frames of important paintings like The Hay Wain, The Girl with the Pearl Earring, and The Last Supper. But why would this have anything to do with my Nana, Violet, who seldom used the word supper? She said tea for dinner and dinner for lunch, and her idea of a gallery was Woolworths department store in Keighley, a northern town famous for the rise of the British National Party, and Blow Dry, a 3 out of 10 Bill Nighy film about a hairdressing competition. Me and my sister called our grandma Nana. She had her hair done every week. She was born in 1917 and lived happily in her Bradford council flat until 2011, when she passed away aged 94, still winking and flirting with the junior doctors on her deathbed. And Nana Violet was energetic and determined, but she wasn't really an activist. Get rid of that. She wasn't really an activist. I was born in the 80s when eco-protest was other people's mums and grands occupying Greenham Common, an anti-nuclear family who dressed as witches and teddy bears and liked middle-class stuff like chaining themselves together, ululating, which is a feminist kind of screaming, having sex with each other politically, crafting giant spiders' webs and waving mirrors at the guards that they were disarming. And these women seemed nothing like my mum or my gran. Like, my mum went to Tupperware parties. She listened to Simply Red, it's not a communist thing, and she worked at Marks and Spencer's. Nana kept busy reading Mills and Boon romance novels about hot doctors getting struck off. Mum and Nana were too occupied with everyday life to occupy a nuclear base. And whilst road protesters in the 90s squatted in tunnels, Nana Violet preferred to spend her retirement the traditional way, watching boxing, wrestling, darts and action films like Fast and Furious. Yeah, Violet had more lives than Fast and Furious 9, the sequel that was shot on Greenham Commons airfield. A rocket car catapults pop stars who can't act into orbit to destroy a satellite. But Violet was down to earth. Like, she had to be, didn't she? She was born into the Spanish flu of World War I and died the year of the London riots, the Occupy movement, Slut Walk, and the anti-fracking group Frack Off. Coincidence? I think not. Not long after Nana died, I started to appreciate how resourceful she'd been. Like, she wasn't an ecologist exactly, but she'd helped us to collect tin cans for that Blue Peter appeal, which encouraged kids to hang around drunk guys in the park, gleaning their dropped tinnies to sell to recycling centres in aid of less fortunate kids who didn't stink of stale Stella. My Nana never touched a drop of booze, though, except for a port and lemonade once a year when her signature Christmas cake, which tasted of gravy granules, because she'd add those in as her secret ingredient. Ultra-processed factory foods got Nana's generation through wars and then freed women from the kitchen, so her cupboards were always stocked high with tinned puddings, bird's custard powder and soup. And Nana's favourite soup was Heinz cream of tomato, the kind that Andy Warhol ate every day of his adult life. And the same brand that Just Stop Oil protesters, Phoebe and Anna, flung over the glass covering of Van Gogh's sunflower painting. And they're in court next month, and they might go to jail for peacefully standing up for the future. In 2023, the Public Order Bill made all protests deemed noisy or a nuisance illegal. And Violet was sometimes noisy and a nuisance, wasn't she? She loved slurping cream of tomato, and she'd always had an affinity with Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers because Vincent had cut off his own ear for love, and Nana, a fellow amputee, had electrocuted her left thumb to smithereens in a kettle accident in a Blackpool bed and breakfast. It was the same. I'm glad you think that my Nana's pain is funny. It was the same, but it's a happy story. It was the same B&B where she'd met her boyfriend Jeff. Young love in their 80s, she called him her fancy fella. He was a karaoke enthusiast and hoarder of lawnmower parts who did not own a whole lawnmower. Jeff was a flamboyant ex-miner and fireman. His flat cap smelt of cream of mushroom, He was fond of resting his eyes while you were talking to him, and he spread a conspiracy theory that all brands of shampoo were made in the same factory in Wakefield. It's true. Jeff competed in ad hoc local gurning competitions and once lost his false teeth on Benidorm Beach. They were never found. And when Just Stop Oil protesters sprinkled jigsaw puzzles and glittery confetti on tennis courts at Wimbledon in 2023, I remembered that Nana and Jeff loved a jigsaw puzzle. Naive kittens with massive eyes, steam engines, or those tricky baked bean ones. Yeah, if Nana and Jeff's ghosts were to return to Earth to save the world from climate change by influencing protest tactics, their superpower would most definitely be jigsaws. Jigsaws and confetti. Nana's sideboard always had a box of bedraggled confetti in it, presumably scraped from the tarmac outside the church at a family wedding under the guise of collecting a keepsake, but with the secret intention of reusing it at the loved one's inevitable second marriage. Waste not, want not, love. Confetti was a luxury, an upgrade from our family tradition of throwing rice at newlyweds. I don't know if anyone had that, but it wasn't the sticky cooked rice flung into the bride's face, but the raw stuff that will make the pigeons explode behind a happy couple like feathery low-budget fireworks. And Nana had to watch her carbs because of her diabetes, but her cupboards were full of sweets, or confectionery, as she called it, a term which sounded more sensible than the hundreds of out-of-date Mars bars, Lucozade tablets, Dolly mixtures, Tic Tacs and Thornton's misshapes bought in bulk at Bradford Market. And when protesters puffed neon orange dust onto a snooker table at the World Championships, it was suspiciously the same Garfield hue as Nana's favourite sherbet dibdabs from Mr. Robinson's tuck shop in the petrol station forecourt next to Bailed and Chippy, near the cattle grid by my friend Hazel's parents' house, which they haggled down to a right bargain because someone had been murdered there. That house had a lovely aspect, didn't it? It backed out onto the moors and you could watch strangers having sex in a Fiesta estate from the kitchen window while making tea. Nana loved a cuppa as much as she loved orange sherbet, snooker, jigsaws, confetti and soup, and she was never far from a kettle. So, when Just Stop Oil protesters were kettled last year by a rival group called Just Stop Pissing Everyone Off, I felt certain that it was an inside job and that she had something to do with it. Yeah, when activists entered the National Gallery and placed a printed spoof of Constable's The Hay Wain over the original painting, their version had satanic mills like Bradford and a broken washing machine that looked uncannily similar to the one in Jeff's garage. Nana would have found their version more relatable. Even John Constable, the painter, he found the Hay Wain so unremarkable when he painted it that he'd first titled it Landscape Noon, later rebranding it as Hey Wayne, like some rad mashup of the 90s oddball comedy Wayne's World and Hey Arnold, a cartoon we'd watch with Nana about a boy with an American football-shaped head. Art fact. The cottage in the Hay Wain was owned by a tenant farmer called Willie Lott, a name fit for a well-endowed drag king whose POV we can presume the scene depicts. Nana Violet wasn't a gallery goer, really. She preferred painting her own pictures of dormice and rainy landscapes with beautiful frames she'd handmade at night school. And she didn't go to art school, or any school really. She started working in Manningham Mill aged 16 and she had to run home at lunchtime to care for her dad. Nana was a tailor and she knew a lot about textiles. She'd make dresses from Vogue patterns and snake-shaped draft excluders with the offcuts. Clothes shopping with her took ages. She'd fondle and frisk every item, and when fast fashion hit skip to market, it was the slogan t-shirts that caught her eye. I was studying art at Oxford University when a present from Nana Violet arrived in my pigeonhole. And she often sent prezzies, but this one was kind of special. Yeah, it was a t-shirt. She was losing her eyesight by then, so perhaps she didn't realise, but emblazoned across the front of the t-shirt in diamante letters the size of fists was a shiny 3-letter word. S-E-X. Not sexy, but sex. The word sex on its own was stretched across the chest of the t-shirt I received from my then 86-year-old grandmother. When protesters flashed T-shirts with slogans about oil at the King's coronation last year, I felt sure that Nana Violet would approve of embellishing athleisure with a word for lubricant. Nana and Jeff called themselves recycled teenagers, love, and they made a point of telling everyone 10 times that they had bought a double bed. And Nana had another fancy fella, a retired bus driver called Omar, who was in his 60s and drove a Volvo full of Coca-Cola multi-packs, which he sipped constantly to tame a perpetual urinary tract infection, which he often described to Nana Violet in great details, which she then relayed back to us. Nana knew all the bus drivers, don't worry, it's nearly done. Nana knew all the bus drivers. Her bus pass was her Ferrari, and when Just Stop Oil started walking slowly in front of buses, I recalled her inflicting anarchy on the 864 bus to Ilkley. Yeah, she'd use her walking stick, which folded out into a chair, to whack people the way that pro wrestlers did, so that we could get the best seats on the bus. Once, we sat behind a man with a wart on his bald head, and she pointed at it and talked about it the whole journey, inches from his ear. Like Just Stop Oil, Nana was not afraid to breach social etiquette to point out the elephant in the room. When Just Stop Oil sat in front of a bus at London's Pride Parade last year, impeding the wheels of pink-washing investment banks blasting Katy Perry tracks, I knew Violet was there in spirit. And I was never out as queer when Nana was alive, but I don't think that she'd have had anything against my pansexuality. The only thing she'd have struggled with, though, are gender-neutral pronouns. And it's not because she was prejudiced, but simply because for her, the pronoun they, them has always meant one thing. Yeah, Bradford Council. Oh, they've moved the bus stop by the post office, you know, love. They've still not fixed that pavement by the petrified tree. Who haven't, Nana? Them at council. The petrified tree was a landmark in the park near Nana's house. Giant concrete sewer pipes had been installed in lieu of swings and slides so kids could hide and smoke in them or dissect fireworks to make little bombs. The renowned stone tree stump in the park was petrified, both in the sense that limestone from rainwater had replaced its living cells over hundreds of years, but also in the sense that the park was quite rough, and like everyone else in the vicinity, the petrified tree feared for its life. And Nana was not the sensitive kind of tree hugger. And when protesters targeted the musical Les Miserables last year, I recalled Nana Violet whispering loudly at a performance of Starlight Express. She was gesturing towards a fellow audience member with large breasts and hissing in disgust. "Will you look at the bust on her?" she said. And Nana's own body was made buxom only by the cash she kept in her underwear. A bodice she called her panty girdle, into which she'd sewn a high-security pouch of banknotes. And I have no evidence that Nana's ghost was the one who sprayed the words "Just Stop Oil" in orange paint on the Bank of England building, but the stash of cash in her pants sure demonstrated her critique of financial infrastructure. As a non-driver and member of the Ramblers Hiking Club, Violet always found alternatives to petrol. Notably, a wellness potion from Holland and Barrett called Mason's Dog Oil. You can try it later. An ointment made of 100% vegetable oil paste, originally used to help greyhounds slide through the air when they were racing, but now marketed at pensioners with a penchant for placebos. And I like to think that Just Stop Oil is in fact an abbreviation of the group's full name, which is Just Stop Oil except Mason's Dog Oil, Albus Oil, there's some there, and that Bernie Nilbit stuff that you paint on your nails to stop your habit of biting them. I don't have that anymore. These alternative oils were kept in Violet's useful drawer, which was always stocked with super glue, carefully labelled so not to mix it up with the hemorrhoid cream. Every time me and my sister accidentally smashed Violet's most prized possession, a ceramic shoehorn with a creepy little hand on the end, it was super glued back together in a flash. It would make a great protest prop, I think, that haunted shoehorn. And I start to wonder what innovative protest ideas Nana's ghost will come up with next. Like, she used to collect the last slithers of bars of soap and squish them together into a soapy kebab. Like, maybe could she wash greenwashers' mouths out with it? Or could she silence the cynics with her Fox's Glacier mints, the ones with an image of a stranded polar bear on the packet you see there? Like, could she use that? I mean, don't mention mint imperials. We have decolonised those. Or post kippers. She used to post kippers to us, like every time that she went on holiday to Fleetwood. And maybe, because we were usually away when they arrived, so when we returned home to our house, it had a scent of Hades, and she could post those kippers to buy-to-leave apartments owned by oil tycoons. Nana's flat was full of tights. Like, she wore them all year round. There's some there, like 10 denier or 20 denier, depending on the season. And denier is a word for the thickness of tights, but it's spelled D-E-N-I-E-R, the same way as climate change denier. And I don't know if I believe that the ghost of Nana Violet has come back from the grave to save us from climate change as the creative director of Just Stop Oil. But I know that industrial capitalism is not much older than her, and unlike the media will have you believe, climate activists are not violent extremists. They're grands and daughters and sons and friends, all making personal sacrifices for an urgent cause. They're not violent extremists, they're just Violet, a pensioner from Bradford who likes soup, jigsaws, disrupting buses and singing all things bright and beautiful at the top of her lungs. And we sang it at her funeral, and I can't hear it now without crying. You won't be able to either, because I'm going to sing it and it'd be really bad. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, let's have a gunning competition at the mall. Each little flower that opens, each little bird that sings, glue your buttocks to the hay when it's shit anyway, interrupt contemporary dance with itchy knitting. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful. The ideology of exponential growth on a finite planet has fucked us all. Thank you.
Give it up for Louise, thank you.